Okay, my name is Preston Vaudry, and this is a Raspberry Pi. Their website's changed a little bit since I was last here, but basically a Raspberry Pi is a condensed miniature computer. And the goal of a Raspberry Pi is to try and bring computing in general, but more specifically coding and using computers in more of an enthusiast way to the masses, right? So they have a lot of different products that can be used on both the consumer level and in a business sense. This right here is the Raspberry Pi 400. The Raspberry Pi 400 is actually a computer kit that's condensed into the actual size of like a keyboard, right? The computer is built into the keyboard. And that's one of the things that they tend to do with their computers. So like this Raspberry Pi 4, it's got a dedicated Ethernet port and 64-bit, I think it was an octa-core CPU, just a lot of computing built into a single module, and then, they're also very, very affordable, right? So they start at like $35, right, for this particular compute module. They come with a dedicated Raspberry Pi OS that's built to kind of help you become a coder, right? So opposed to Windows or maybe Mac OS, where these separate OSs are built for you to just kind of be able to immediately get whatever task done you need to do, right? Whether it's video editing or word processing, whatever, right? You can just get on and do them. On a Raspberry Pi, you're encouraged to kind of build out a lot of these programs yourself, right? So for example, there have been a lot of reviews talking about these Raspberry Pis. One of the common issues with them is that you'll get a Raspberry Pi and then, you can't connect it to the internet, right? You can plug in an Ethernet port, but you can't necessarily connect to the internet because the built-in controller and drivers for receiving internet aren't there, right? And not only that, but like some of these modules don't have built-in internet receivers, right? So maybe you have to connect a separate receiver via USB. And so advantages and disadvantages of Raspberry Pi. One of the advantages is that it's a very good way for people to learn and get into coding as a hobby or as even a career space, right? It's a great way, an inexpensive way to get into coding and computing without needing to build a massive computer system that can, do X, Y, and Z at 1,000 megabytes a second. I don't know, right? That's just one of the advantages, right? For $35, you can basically get a computer that, has 4K output, can do basic computing, and you can kind of build it how you want to. One of the disadvantages to a Raspberry Pi, though, is also kind of its advantage, right? Because they're not necessarily small, but the Raspberry Pi organization is based in the United Kingdom, so for United States individuals, these can be particularly difficult to get, right? You can find them on Amazon, but, when you go to buy now, it's not like you're just checking out real quick. You have to find one of their retailers, and, that's kind of how that works. But one of the advantages for businesses, though, is that you can use some of these microcontrollers to monitor and observe hardware live, right? So say, for example, I'm in a factory where we're building widgets, right? I've got 1,000 different machines that are constantly working and operating. Some of them might need maintenance more often than others. Some of them might rarely need maintenance. I can code a Raspberry Pi device to constantly monitor all of these 1,000 devices and send constant updates to a server that I can pull out and, look at once a month and say, okay, right now we have 40 devices out of 1,000 that need maintenance. This is the kind of maintenance that we need. Let's order the maintenance and have them go work on these specific devices. And that's it, right? You don't necessarily have to have an inspector go in and manually inspect each one. It kind of eliminates the necessity for someone to have to go and manually inspect these devices. Yeah, but other than that, Raspberry Pis are miniature computers that can be used for both consumer, industrial, and coding technologies. Thanks for watching. Most of my resources came from LTT Store or Linus Tech Tips or Short Circuit on YouTube. That's where you can find them. Or actually from RaspberryPi.org or independent reviewers.